Okay, who's missing, if anyone? Let's see, Dan, David, Sylvia, Steve, myself. I think that's all of us. So now we have a quorum, we have the whole committee.
Okay, Dan Camelia, we got to go live. Those are the
Okay,
rules.
now I'm co-host and you'll be sorry because here it comes. Where am I? Okay, so you can see my screen.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, so it is now, where's my notepad? It is now 7:02. 7:07, according to my computer. And I'm calling the meeting to order. Gender before you. First item, of course, introduction of committee members and guests. So the only guests I see are Camelia. And that's it, right?
Laura.
And Laura.
And Luke.
Well, I don't count Luke because he doesn't hang around long enough.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
thank you, Luke. You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Hit and run, eh, Luke?
Gone. One button, he's gone. Okay. So approval of the minutes, chair's report. This is the same that was posted. What do you call it? When it was when public notice went out. I put down adjournment here. Next meeting, June 12th. We'll come back to that later on. So the first item of the agenda is approval of the minutes. There are two corrections that I'm aware of. Camelia's name was left off. And David pointed out that whatever I wrote down was wordy and the word recording made more sense. So those are the two changes I am aware of. Anyone else have any comments for changing the minutes? Hearing nothing, I ask for a motion to approve.
His hand is up.
Whose hand? I don't see.
Camelia. Marty, do you have the participants on the side, the list of participants?
At the moment, no.
Okay, do you know how to bring it up?
Yes.
Okay, because when you're hosting, you probably don't see the hands, but if you have the participants list, you will.
Okay, now I can't find that. So I'm gonna do this. And then I'm gonna do this. Okay, and now I'll go back to screen share because I have that list up. Where was I? Okay. Now I lost the list, by the way. All I have is the pictures of 4 people. So David, I'll count on you to tell me if the hand is raised. So Camelia, you have a comment?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, David. Maybe you can help, with the hands and everything, because it is a little bit tricky. Yes, sir. Just wanted to say, as far as the minutes section where you're discussing, how to say, the role of the committee as far as taking issues related to the conflict of interest board. I don't want to interrupt you now, so I just wanted to flag this. I think you have some sort of issues with some wording in the ethical guidance manual that actually kind of lays an expectation on the LRE committee to take positions or advise members when an issue that could be a conflict of interest arises. We did have an issue fairly significant that happened 6 months into discussing an issue, resulting in a chair sort of recusing himself from chairing. So I think there is something there that needs to be further discussed. I will leave it as the last item, but I just wanted to flag this early, and thank you for making the correction as far as my attendance.
Okay, thank you. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. And if we don't discuss it tonight, please direct it to me so I can look at it. The position we've had We've had representatives of the COIB present at 2 of our meetings in the last couple of years. And it's very clear to me, whatever may be written or you may be interpreting as, but it's clear to me that the bottom line is not what anyone, and I'll come to this later on in the meeting. It's very clear. It's not what any of us think it ought to be or might be. The Conflict of Interest Board is the only legal body that can make that decision. So we could be right or wrong. It's irrelevant. It's without the COIB making a statement. And by the way, an individual who thinks they may have a conflict will contact COIB on their own, unless the committee thinks they ought to move on it. And then we'll get a confidential response, which the person is free to share or not share, but needs to be guided by that opinion. Take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Anyone objecting? They are approved. Chair's
Just-
report.
Just a question, Camelia, were you talking something in regards to the minutes? I understand the issue you're raising, but was it with
Yes,
regard
then,
to the minutes?
look, I will read you the 2 sentences I'm referring to. Martin, I apologize. Maybe just easier to read the 2 sentences and then you guys come to any
Are you
conclusion
reading
on.
from the minutes? Are you
Yes,
reading
I will
from-
read from 2 documents. One, the minutes says, Chair reiterated his position concerning real or potential conflicts of interest. As he stated in the past, any board member thinking there may be a conflict needs to direct the question to COIB. Any advice that this chair or any other board member may offer has no weight and is purely a suggestion, which is what you just reiterating. However, I'm looking at the ethical guidance manual, page 5 on the bottom. And it says the committee is available on an open or confidential basis, open or confidential, or I don't know about that, or for information or advice to any appointed board member or any committee member upon approval of the chair. The committee is obliged to inform the board of official reports, decision and advice provided for guidance of community boards. The committee maintains a reference file of such information for the benefit of board and community members. So to me, the understanding on the ethical guidance manual is that you do have to take a position if asked. And we had a meeting where literally a person in the community told us this person is in a conflict of interest.
I'm gonna,
And yeah.
at this point,
So-
to rule you out of order, I'm going to request again, send me that, I see that I've highlighted the question you raised relative to the minutes. I will review the
Thank you. Thank you.
the what do you call it, the ethical guidance manual, but I don't think what you read and what I believe are in conflict. We don't,
Okay, yeah.
implies that we must make a decision, then that implication is incorrect. The-
Okay, so what I'm saying is
make-
just to clarify, yeah.
The position we take very easily and should be, we don't have the authority to make a decision, and please contact COIB, which a member of the public can do, a board member can do, even the committee can do if it so chooses. But having said that, please let me follow up on it at next meeting to be sure.
Thank you.
Going to the chair's report. And speaking of the ethical guidance manual, it was brought to my attention back in 2021. And we did something about it, or I thought we did, and was brought to my attention again a couple of weeks ago, that the conflict that there is a conflict in the ethical guidance manual by having 2 statements that say the exact opposite. And the intent when we rewrote or later edited or whatever we did after that, just to remind you, the ethical guidance manual was a personal project of the late Irving Latimer. He put it together, he presented it to the board. I don't believe there was a vote. It was handed to the board as Irving's project. Rosemary and I and Irving a couple of years later, reviewed it, revised it. And over the course of time, there've been some other revisions. I don't remember when this revision took place, but I do know a question came up with a particular board member, at this point, I'll leave unnamed, who, when it came time for the nominating committee, applied for 2, 3, 4 positions, wanted to be considered for each of them. It was decided at that time, that the minutes, the ethical guidance manual allowed for there to be more than one position one could apply for. And the change made at that time was that you could only apply for one position. Take your pick. This does not prevent any individual from being nominated from the floor if they're not on the slate. And they can choose to do what they want to do, and then the board operates in its normal fashion. So I bring to your attention that on May 10th, 2021, there's the attendance and absence. Item number 4 in those minutes, I've quoted completely, but I go to the last line. The committee agreed to authorize the elimination of the item from the posted EGM. The full board will be so advised. Excuse me. That was the LRE committee. At the bo-
So Marty, if you could just clarify, what did we vote on? We agreed to authorize elimination of what item?
As I say, the ethical guidance manual has one statement which says you can apply for multiple tasks. And the rule that we came up with prior to, after that, when we revised it, was you can only apply to be on the slate for one position. And so the conflict is that there are 2 statements that are contradictory. And so we agreed to eliminate the one that was counter to what the intent was. And so you'll note again, in the May meeting, May 10th, we agreed to eliminate the statement that says a person could apply for more than one position. At the 5/11, the next day, board meeting, I reported that the committee will correct a contradictory statement in the EGM to reflect that board members can seek only one position on the slate. So that's what was the intent. I know I followed up on it. I cannot find my email to the board office, but I know we discussed it. And to my chagrin, to my embarrassment, it was never corrected as it should have been. So I'm bringing this to your attention, that having been brought to my attention, I requested the board office again to eliminate the contradictory statement. And that is now what is in the board website. If one goes to look at the ethical guidance manual, it only has one statement, not the contradictory one. I do this as a report.
Okay, so just to clarify, Marty, you fixed the website.
Yes,
Okay, gotcha, understood.
Luke fixed the website.
okay, Luke fixed the website.
Marty
My-
gave a copy.
My impression at the moment, since you raised that, Laura, is that at the time this was being done, the board office did not have complete control over what was on the website and had to go through a third party to make the corrections, and perhaps that's where things fell through. But I take personal responsibility that I did not follow up as I should have and thought I did. Okay, that was item number 1. Item number 2,
Marty, you have a couple of hands up, just to point out. I see Camelia and
Okay.
Steve have their hands up.
Steve,
I think it's not necessary. My comment is not necessary now. I'm just going to say that this is purely an administrative correction, because Marty apparently did the research and found not only had the committee made a recommendation, it was announced to the board that there was this inconsistency. I know Julie Reyes noted it when she chaired the nominating committee a couple of years ago. before the last one, I guess 3 times ago. And so this has been sort of like a nagging error in there, but it was corrected. It was intended to be corrected at an earlier date, and Marty has fortunately ferreted out the legislative history. So thank you, Marty. That's
Thank
all.
you. Camelia?
No, sorry, Marty, it was previous hand.
Okay.
Okay. It was brought, well, actually, I receive, I guess daily now, the Bronx Times review, the Bronx Times newspaper. And they had a story about this community board, was 11, where an apology was requested by a member of the community from the community board, because there was an issue about a home being converted to a usage that most of the residents, or it appeared the residents didn't want. But the people who came to speak against the project were not treated fairly based upon this individual's perception. And she she requested of their ethics committee that an apology come from the board. I underline here, a point now moot. I didn't write this. This is what's in the article, since the board already voted against the project. So I mean, there was some craziness going on. I wasn't there. I don't want to report on it, but I was just flagged personally by how this process worked in Board 11. As a result of that, they noted also, and I followed up, the board has a conduct statement, which is on their website, and that's where I got this. And I like the first one. We don't have such a statement. I thought we intended to, or did something with the civility request of all board members, but I just found this interesting, and I will share it with the committee, because maybe we should talk about this next month, so that whether or not we should have such a statement. Any action or behavior that disrupts or interferes with Community Board 11 business will not be tolerated during any Community Board 11 meeting, and may result in individuals being asked to leave. If the action or behavior continues, it may be considered disturbing the peace, and the appropriate authorities may be summoned. If the meeting is held remotely, that person will be muted and expelled for the remainder. Interesting concept, something to think about. And while this is, I think, focused on the public, I think it might also be focused on board members. It's interesting, and I'll discuss it later. I asked Dan if he wants to, I don't know if he stayed till the end of the meeting. But 3 of us and 1 other board member attended the first, I attended 2 of them, of the meetings on parliamentarianism, whatever. And 1 board member toward the end of the meeting was very adamant about their board meetings. People are highly disrespectful to the representative of the borough president. I don't think that's right on many levels, but apparently that board, whatever it was, he never identified himself, but that was somewhat surprising to hear. And in this context, it rang a bell in my mind. Any thoughts, comments?
On I mean, I went to the first meeting, and I mean, like I shared with you after the email when the feedback, it seems like, you know, a lot of it was dealing with quorum issues. I think, you know, they brought us some points. I'm glad they're having the meetings. They did kind of point out kind of all of the different things that we're subject to, the different rules and laws, and I thought that was, you know, important to break out. I think we've covered many of those issues over the years.
And obviously from the questions asked, there are many people in the borough who need it. And one of the arguments that spent a whole lot of time was the definition of quorum. Because not everyone, many people, and I'm probably guilty of this too, would say a quorum is one more than half. And they pointed out, being extremely fastidious, that if you go by that definition, then you no longer have a quorum if you have two more than half, because the quorum is only one more than half. So
Right.
that's the level of some of the conversation. But I will come back to that because there's a lot of issues I want to bring about. Now, another issue came up.
Marty, I'm sorry, can I say something on the issue of the code of conduct of 11?
I'll take this comment now, but can I ask you to wait to the end of the meeting for your comments and thoughts? And I
Yeah,
want
but,
to do our
okay,
agenda.
but, okay,
Make your
sure, but
comment.
this is on the, yeah, so I mean, on CB 11 code of conduct, see, I wasn't to the meeting that the apology was requested for, and I also attend frequently their full board meetings for work reasons, and I strongly encourage CBA to have a similarly written code of conduct, because there were members that in the past for many years took certain language liberties which probably should be better regulated and would require LRE, by the way, to have a position. And it's much easier if there is a stated code of conduct that states expectation and choices of words versus just, you know, not having one. On this year, a city agency for a city representatives from DOT were referred to as morons on a meeting. So I do believe that your reference in an earlier full board meeting earlier this year, where you kind of made a plea to civility, is insufficient. Something written has to be there as guidance. Also, I just want to flag, we did have a little bit of an incident with a video camera, I think accidentally, in an executive session of the last full board meeting, and other board meetings in CB7 did have inappropriate camera exposure, and there was also a flipping of a finger in another CB11 Zoom meeting. So this issue is an issue that has to be more explicit in CB8, but we are by far much better behaved than others. Just wanted to put it out there. But a code of conduct should be a written expectation that LRE should articulate, Marty, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Just note that I don't, even though I'm parliamentarian and I've pressed for it, and I'm pleased that we have a statement on civility, I don't see myself as the Board 8 police officer to shut people up who I believe are being uncivil. And I've seen lots of examples of incivility. But I certainly I'm not the police for the other boards who have their own problems. Let's focus on us. And I thank you for your comment. Search committee created a problem this year in which I find strange to begin with. The issue came up. Well, let's set the scene. We have a committee that has been, and based on the executive committee last week and what's supposed to happen tomorrow night, may have come to a conclusion. We will come to a conclusion, but the search committee was interviewing candidates for the position of district manager. They believed, and I agree with them, they believed that any interviews that took place with any of the applicants needed to be an executive session for a number of reasons. Reason number one is the whole idea that the discussion is about their work experience, their backgrounds, and whatever, much of which fits under exactly what the conflict of interest law, with the open meetings law says can and should be in a confidential nature in a closed session, executive session. And the second issue is if you had a meeting where individuals who were not part of the committee came to it, then there would possibly be a unnecessary exposure of the applicant who has not provided her employer with any idea that they're thinking of leaving or looking for another job. And that information getting out could be distressful for someone who applies and doesn't get the job. And it's known that they applied. That be almost anybody. If I applied for the job and people knew I applied for it, I didn't get it, I might be somewhat distressed that that information was out there. So it was brought to the attention of the search committee that the notice that they put out, which said this meeting will be called to order for executive session, nobody show up, was inappropriate. Was inappropriate because a priori, one cannot suggest that you know for a fact, even though it's obvious here, it is a fact, that there will be an executive session meeting. The requirements are you meet in public session, you vote to go into executive session, and anyone who wants to attend to see you take attendance, have a vote, they could be free to do that. The statement was corrected, and I will get to the statement in a second, but I did contact conflict of interest. I did contact Committee on Open Government with that question, and I got several references for opinions. What are they called? Advisory opinions. And this one dated back to 1993 with our good friend Robert Freeman. And that first paragraph, this is from a much larger letter. A public body cannot, in my view, schedule an executive session in advance of a meeting. In short, because a vote to enter into executive session must be made and carried by a majority vote of the total membership during an open meeting. Technically, it cannot be known in advance of that vote that the motion will indeed be approved. Well, obviously the motion, if there are 3 members of the committee and they've all agreed that they will go into executive session, you do know in advance it will be approved. But the fact is the law is very clear, and they've made it very clear that you cannot do that. However, you'll notice he follows up in the same paragraph. Rather than scheduling an executive session, you or the board on its agenda could refer to or schedule a motion to enter an executive session to discuss certain subjects. Reference to a motion to conduct an executive session would not represent an assurance that executive session would ensue, but rather there is an interest to enter into executive session by means of a vote. So as I interpret this, you cannot say in a meeting notice, even though the world is fully aware that this will be an executive session, you must first hold a public meeting to vote to go into that executive session. And so the announcements that went out subsequent to that, or as I point out here, these are the steps. You open the meeting, take attendance, you announce the reason to going to executive session, you vote, and then you have your executive session, and you vote to come out of executive session, and then you adjourn the meeting, and then you provide minutes. And minutes generally are, we had a meeting, we discussed candidates, and so on. And so this statement at the bottom here, please see attached and below for a meeting of the Bronx, I'm having trouble reading myself here. Meeting Bronx Ward District Manager Search Committee. Kindly note that after the committee roll call is taken, a motion to go into executive session will be made. It's anticipated the motion will pass. In that event, the interview will be conducted in executive session and no participation by members of the public or anyone other than the members of the committee. So I'm bringing this to your attention This is the research that was done. This is the procedure that was followed. And I'm sharing that all with you. Are there any comments, thoughts?
Marty?
I see David's hand up.
Yeah,
David?
I just want to say, it seems fine, but I would note that this thing about going into executive session, our announcement of it, I'd mentioned it to Laura. It's all true, it's all valid. I think it's worth having another sentence saying that, under open meetings law, matters dealing with personnel, require us to go, for privacy reasons, require us to go into executive session, and then go on to the rest of that explanation. Because otherwise it sounds like, hey, we're gonna, go dark right after we start.
It strikes me if you use the phrase requires us to go into executive session, you're practically saying in advance you're having one. So to try and be clear of the interpretation, misinterpretation, I mean, I think this follows what's necessary. It advises the community, it's a public meeting, we're gonna have a vote. No, the vote will be to go into executive session, but we can't predict what the outcome might be. So you're advised. And I frankly would leave it there.
But
Although
you
there's-
don't want to explain why? It's
Well,
quite
it's obvious
simple.
why. No,
Huh?
this sentence is not the agenda. The agenda is the meeting of the search committee, district manager search committee, and it's going to be interviews. And it's in there. It's not in this statement, but it's in the agenda.
I'm sorry, could you roll up? I missed that on the agenda.
Well, no, it's not here.
Okay,
The agenda that was mailed out to the immediate world. This is the reason they were coming to meet.
yeah, I understand. Well, all right. I thought it would be a worthwhile explanation to those people who aren't aware of how we proceed. I think it's a very rational procedure. I just think that it might be useful for the outside world to understand why we're going dark.
Well, certainly we'll consider it. I'll get back to the next meeting after talking to a number of you. But my sense still is immediately, which may be wrong, but that it presupposes, and we want to keep away from presupposing, even though it's valid. 3 people are meeting, 3 people agree. You know what the outcome of the vote will be, but you can't predict.
Marty, you have a couple of hands raised.
And I can't see any of them, so call them off, please.
Dan?
Steve, no, you were before me, Steve. Yeah, Steve. And
Okay,
then
I was just
know.
gonna say that, I mean, I don't think it's earth shaking. I agree with you that it would be incorrect to presuppose with the word required, but I do think that David's point is well taken, and it can read in such a way that it says, kindly note, after the committee roll call is taken, comma, a motion to go into executive session will be made, to the extent that matters of blah, 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 whatever the normal situations that warrant it. And then you are giving notice that, given the nature of the committee, the task force, et cetera, just gives the public a little more information. It does not mean it will happen, because you can't predict the vote, exactly as you've said, but it does seem a little less a matter of fiat. So anyway, so I'm supporting David's idea with a little wordsmithing. That's-
My apologies. I should not have used the word requires. That may have thrown a wrench into the works.
Dan?
Yeah, no, look, I'm glad the required thing, obviously, I think we're all on the same page right now. I mean, the law basically says you may conduct an executive session for matters leading to the employment of a particular person. So quite frankly, you can kind of just use that exact language, what the law says, you put in there, right? We may. I think the only remaining issue that I think in here is just it's anticipated the motion will pass. I don't think there's a need to actually say it. I think by including the fact that, a motion will be made and you have that on the agenda, and then you put in there, as that note saying, pursuant to OML, we may make a motion to go into executive session for matters leading to the employment of a particular person. Anyone seeing this is going to realize, what's really going on, and we satisfy the law. And truth is, if somebody wants to come to the meeting, sit there for 1 or 2 minutes to see what's going on, and maybe the chair of that committee will say, does anybody have any comments? Kind of like the way we did a few years back. They might want to open up to comments. They might not. Who knows? But you take the vote, you go into the session and go from there. I think it's just the point that if somebody wants to come to the meeting and show up for a minute, they can. If they want to see the vote happen, they can. If they want to sit in a dark room or a Zoom screen for whatever amount of time, they can. And that's what they're permitted to do.
That's all true. My only problem with that, well, I have two problems. Problem number one is that with the candidates sitting out there, their secrecy is gone. And
Well-
problem number two is that more importantly, and I hold my breath as I say this, based on tomorrow night's meeting, it is my hope and prayer that for most of us, our term limits will run out and we will not have to deal with this situation for quite some time.
Understood. Marty, I'm just going to make one point. If you remember, we moved the search committee from the board office to Manhattan College to put it into a different location and to make it a little bit more anonymous for folks at the last interviews that we did when we did the Kira hiring.
I remember
Because
that.
we did face the issue at the board office. I think it was the hire before that where we had asked the candidates to come and we were upstairs up in Mosaic. And people were just kind of out there and we faced that issue. And to deal with that issue, we said, okay, let's go to Manhattan College and find a place a little bit off the grid from our normal office where they're not going to realize somebody coming to visit us. And that was just a way that we dealt with it when we had the Kira, search committee. So there are ways to handle the secrecy of candidates to maintain, their identity.
Okay, but going back, I remember the Kira interview, I remember sitting in that classroom.
Yep.
I don't know that our desire at the time was as focused as it has become now. And we certainly we wanted the anonymity of any candidate to be the case. But again, this is not going to be, I will take all your suggestions on how I might inform our successors. I'm not sure how many that includes, but I'm hoping for the board's sake that this does not come up for a while. I can't think of any other situation where it might come up.
I do see Sylvia's hand, Marty, just so you know.
Sylvia?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms or not, but I'm kind of involved in this because I had brought up the fact that the DM interview was going to be on one of the Passover more religious days, the one of the last days, and I was told that it doesn't matter because they're only going to have this very short open meeting and then they're going into executive session. Many of you were there. No one really said anything, and I'm really wondering why now, after that whole session and it was done wrong at that time, why are we looking at it now? Did someone bring it to your attention, or I don't, you were there when that was said to me, so you didn't say anything. You were going to Florida, so,
The issue is at this moment not Passover. The issue at this moment is protocol and following the law. I certainly had, even though we spoke about it, Bob and I and Laura spoke about the use of this date. It's something I'm hoping won't happen again. So,
but wouldn't it have been better to bring that up as a no at that time rather than wait and talk to Bob and Laura off camera and then bring this weeks later? I mean, it was wrong when it was done.
reporting
And
to,
there was a new agenda set and everything was being cleaned up. And now we're cleaning up even more. I don't understand that.
No, this is retrospective entirely. This is a question of what was done incorrectly, and what was done correctly for the record. So I'm reporting back to the committee because this is the place where it belongs, and I'm sharing with. I'm not going back beyond that.
No, I don't
Okay.
expect you to go back to that particular meeting, but it just seems to me that it should have been done immediately because you were
So-
all there and you all heard it.
So
We're
Marty,
talking-
are we saying prospectively, we're looking to put forward something regarding meetings on holidays?
That was not the
Um,
point though, Dan. The holiday was not the
I-
point. The point was that I was told that there was going to be a very short open meeting and then they were going into executive session. They were saying that it was going to be not just introduced and voted on, but it was going to happen. And we're
Mhm.
doing the same thing here. We're
No,
saying that it
No,
should,
we're not. That issue is what you're correct in saying, that that was the presumption that was made with the initial notice of a meeting. It will go in executive session. It was pointed out to us that that was incorrect. And I'm reporting back to the board based on the law, not based on anything else. This is a one subject report. And that is, an error was made in how the announcement went out. Henceforth, and I said, it's not going to happen for years. I knock on wood and hope that to be the case. That in terms of observing the law, we will do it correctly from day one. And I accept all recommendations on how to rewrite this paragraph. And I'm ready to move on. I'm just laying item E out with no comment because I have no comment to make. Just know that Sergio is still concerned about, he raised it at the last board meeting, what is being done so that community board members can have email addresses that belong to the city. And there are lots of reasons why that should happen. So far, there's no other answer other than, oh, well, Kira said she was looking into it. That's the last I heard. I just want to make sure we're not letting it fall in the cracks. We're keeping an eye on it. Now, back to Dan. Yes, whom?
Today, Sergio's request went to the attorney for the borough president's office, who just took Murtha's place. He's been there about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And as a board, we go to the borough president's office. So we referred it to that attorney.
Okay, so it's being addressed. I have no answer. We have no answer, but I don't want it to lay fallow like nobody cares, because it's an important issue.
Well, we have written to several agencies thus far and have not gotten an answer.
And we've got negative answers.
We've
Can't
gotten
be done.
negative answers, no answers. But now this was happened to be sent today. That's why I'm letting you know.
Well,
I'm
okay, thank you.
confident that they are not going to try to find 3,000 email addresses for all the community boards.
Probably
But
not.
it's still a legitimate question.
And that's the reason I put it on my report.
Absolutely.
We haven't gotten past my report yet. I hope this one doesn't take as long. As I said, 4 of us from the board were participants in the first session. I think I was the only one in the second session on parliamentary procedure. I came away both happy and unhappy with the event. I'm convinced, first of all, that Robert's rules is not a thought or an idea, it's a business. And so why they came out with the 12th edition to supersede the other editions, who knows? I have no idea, comparing this edition to a previous edition, what was changed, whether it was capitalization or concept. They never told us, just told us the new book is out and you should be using this book. So this particular one, I went on their website today. I didn't take a screenshot that I wanted to when they had it up at the meeting, but you can now get it with a spiral binder, if that makes you happy. I'm satisfied. And these people just writing books because they're making money off of it. procedure, the precedents, and make sure I pronounce this right because they're very clear about it's not precedents, it's precedence. What takes place before or after any particular item. And so they pointed out that, and we all knew this, that we're obligated to follow federal, state, and city charter as precedent. Once we've done that, and if an issue comes up, then you look at Robert's rules. You don't look at Robert's rules to change either of the three levels I mentioned. And the one example that always comes back to my mind is that Robert's rules, I don't know which edition, maybe it's changed now. But there are lots of supermajorities required under Robert's rules. Under the city charter, supermajorities are not allowed. Simple majority, which is greater than half the number of people, members of a particular body. And I'd be happy to share this because I took a screenshot. These are the order of precedence of motions. What you have to discuss before you discuss any other. So for example, main motions on the table. In the middle of the main motion, someone makes a motion to adjourn, which is the highest level here. And lo and behold, I mean, that takes precedence. You can vote to adjourn in the middle of anything because that's always allowed to be there. And in the middle of everything, you can vote to lay something on the table. Previous question, well, I'll be happy to share this. I will, in case someone needs wallpaper or there's a hole in the wall they want to cover.
Frankly, I thought that was the most useful thing that they said in the whole session, that chart.
Which is why I took the picture.
Yep.
Now, one thing that was pointed out at the second meeting is something we do regularly, which is in violation of Robert's rules. Now, again, I said before, I'm not the police of Community Board 8, don't plan to be the police. And my philosophy basically is if things are working, don't fix them, let them go forward. If there's an issue, then go to Robert's rules. So we make a practice, and I think David is one of the prime examples where someone will come up with a resolution or a committee will come up with a resolution. And as we begin to discuss it, David will say, or others will say, you ought to change this word or modify this noun or this verb, whatever. And the question we ask is, does the maker of the motion agree to the friendly change, friendly amendment? And if the answer is yes, we move on. The fact is, once a motion is on the table, it doesn't belong to the maker of the motion anymore. If you want to be technically correct, then I say the word should be thus, not the. And will you accept this? The maker of the motion can't say yes. It has to go to a vote to amend the motion to change the word.
That's
I-
not right.
Suggesting we
That's not
change-
correct.
What?
I do not believe that that's correct. I believe that if it's a friendly amendment, that is an exception to requiring a vote. And the person who is making the motion to whatever, have the board vote on a resolution, that person, if they say they accept the amendment, then that becomes the new motion. And it's only when the person who's made the motion does not accept it as a friendly amendment, at that point, it becomes something subject to vote, which, as this chart shows, the vote on the amendment precedes the vote on the main motion, if there's disagreement.
I have no suggestion that we change what we're doing because it works and it's friendly. However, in spite of what I believed, and I do believe what you just said, Steve, they made it very clear that once a motion is on the floor and seconded, it doesn't belong to the maker, it belongs to the body. And the body has to accept any changes.
I see.
Now, I don't care. I'm not recommending change. I'm just telling you, these guys get big bucks. If you have them come in and do a consultation for you, and I'll go back to my first comment in that this is a business.
Well, I'll borrow the book when you order it and it's delivered. I'd like to borrow the book.
Well, you may have to wait a long time because I'm not ordering it.
Oh, come on. We have to be up to date, then I'll order it.
Okay, now we finally finished with my report. I can breathe again. Okay. Now, Dan asked us to look at something. I'm bringing this up in the belief and the hope that people have actually looked at it and read it and are prepared for a conversation about it. I've read it, I've looked at it. I came up with G worth of questions that I have, which I throw open, and I ask just Dan to think about it before I turn it forward over to him. One is, can this wait until we have a district manager and a soon-to-be elected new board chair? Wait for them to be in place and they can participate. I don't think we could or should do it until, I'm not asking for answers yet. I'm just throwing these
Oh,
out.
okay. Yeah.
I don't know what motivated CBA 3M to engage in this opus. What were their objectives? What prompted the board to compile such a, I call it, heavy-handed litany of possible malfeasance? I mean, they went on like crazy. In case you pick up a piece of paper or you drop a paper clip, I can't believe the amount of specificity they went into. Code of conduct I raised before. It strikes me this code of conduct is challenging to employees and their relationship with supervisors. I have no idea who supervisors are. It's confusing. Are they talking about district manager, which they often do? They talk about the chair of the board, which they seldom do. So I don't know what that means. But there's nothing. It's how employees behave toward the supervisors and the public, but there's nothing about how board members talk about relate to employees. These are just general thoughts I had as I read it. While there is value of having all of these in one place, how many of these items do we already have in place, either in our bylaws, in the ethical guidance manual, by city administrative practices, procedures, state regulations, union contracts, procedures? I don't understand why they put all of this together. Unless there's a specific area that needs to be addressed, does replicating what already exists for us a productive use of our time? And finally, if we believe this effort should move forward after the designation of a new board chair and DM, I think a subcommittee should be set up to go line by line and discuss what is value to us and what is not. Get rid of typos. And there are typos in it. The vocabulary issues. There are words in there I don't think are relevant anymore. There are things that are missing. The list of holidays, for example, doesn't have Juneteenth, which it should. I mean, there are a whole host of things which I thought were dated. A word, and I looked to the attorneys, I don't know if this is a correct word, they use the term alienation as a method by which people ought not be discriminated against. By alienation means people who aren't citizens. I'm not sure I even like that word, but I'm not the word police either. And again, they refer to the council. I forget, I said I wrote it down here somewhere, but I didn't. Define
No,
what they mean by supervisor and what they mean by council. And I don't know whether they meant the city council, a council from the city agency, which they're sidestepping COIB on many occasions, or there is a person designated on the board who is their general counsel. I have no idea who that refers to. So there were questions I have as I read it, and again, I'm hoping all of you have read it. And where it goes from here now, I asked Dan to take the floor.
Yeah, so let's start here. I think getting input from the new district manager and the new chair is always helpful. I mean, there's no reason not to. There's no particular rush to get this done, you know, tomorrow. The one piece that I do want to add, there was an email sent to both you and I, Marty, from Lisa, who had forwarded us, I guess, a working copy of a similar, probably not as technical, but a similar guide that I guess Rosemary, Roz, and Lisa had started, I guess, a few years back. And the table of contents, it was excellent what they had already started.
That's all I received, the table of contents.
Yeah. So interesting enough, like from that table of contents, a good amount of those documents they'd actually created. And those documents are, a good amount of them are on our website. So I guess in maybe kind of shortcutting this issue, one, I think a subcommittee is a good idea to deal with it. Whoever wants to help out, I'm certainly willing to work on a subcommittee. But I could also, if you want to share screen, I could show the rest of the members what Lisa had sent us, which, will take a minute to kind of like look at. But I thought, what Rosemary, Roz, and Lisa had put together previously was excellent. And I think it covered a lot of the important topics, from, this guide and such. Did you get, and I'm sure you did, the table of contents? I don't know what you thought of their table of contents.
I had no problem with it at all. And I
Yeah.
think it's a good starting point. So I'm asking you now, what is it you'd like us to do?
No,
At
I think
this-
it's an excellent idea. Let's do a subcommittee and we'll work on it. And again, getting input from other folks.
Are there any volunteers besides Dan to be on this subcommittee?
Marty, my hand is raised, but it's absolutely not to be a member of the subcommittee.
Oh, well,
Not in this life. I would like to react to the suggestion that we, look into this kind of a board document or code. But if this is the appropriate time to do so, because you did ask about a subcommittee, so I don't want to get in your way, but I would like to just very briefly give my reactions, which I.
Perhaps, is it helpful that if I share with the document that Lisa had sent out that they had already started?
I don't think it advances the conversation any. It's a good place to start when the subcommittee meets.
Hmm.
I don't know that advances
Okay.
provide any new information. But there was a second hand, I don't know who it is.
My hand is up. It's Laura.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I have a question for Dan, because I did read this 70, 80 pages. And I would like to know what motivated you to send this in to this committee and to the board. It dealt solely with employees in a rather harsh tone in some sections. And I'm just wondering what motivated you to do that.
Well, it wasn't to have this exact handbook for one. It was essentially to have a guide. And, the beginning point was for me in addressing the topic was to just have I guess more of a protocol in dealing, I guess dealing is the wrong word, but of rights and responsibilities of members, of the office itself. So that way folks can kind of look to this document so that they were new, especially for new members who weren't familiar with, the way we operate. And that was
Well-
the impetus of it.
Well, it really wasn't for new members or really members. It was about employees and the topics, because I worked with Lisa on several of the topics that are on the website. Had to do, I know she turned to me for resolutions. When do we need a resolution? Taking minutes, running a meeting. Those are things that are on the website and that are helpful for new chairs. And then there are internal things. What do we do with the SAPO, with the office? How do we know how to deal with the synagogue and Passover and the Department of Sanitation? There are a ton of things that the workings of the office that are not meant for a website. They're just the internal handbook for the office. And Lisa did say that in her email very strongly on where she felt this belonged and did not belong. As far as promulgating procedures. She did it as
Are we
an-
talking about? Are we
I'm
talking
talking
about
now,
the
I'm
one-
switching to what
what she
Lisa
had
did.
sent out?
Yeah, I mean,
so
flyers,
I-
getting flyers, agendas, meetings, there,
Yeah,
those things are very useful, and I think to our credit, they are up on the website. The procurement
Mhm.
guide is up on the website. I'm not sure, when you say form a subcommittee and delve into other things, what exactly is the scope of what you're addressing?
so Marty, if you could enable either myself as a co-host, I'll share screen, that way I could show Lisa's outline of what they had started a few years ago,
Again,
which is
I
probably a
don't know that
better,
that answers our
but
conversation.
I do. So folks can kind of see where, I'm leaning with this.
I don't, the question still is, this project, what are we doing about it so far, except for you, no one's volunteered.
Okay,
Well, Marty, can I go over a few reactions I had? Because I did read it and I want someone in the world to know I did.
Okay, I'll put it on the stone.
Okay, so first of all, I honestly, I could not agree more, even though it's not up on the screen at the moment. I did see your points E and F, and I couldn't agree more that there are all kinds of sources for this information that's in this manual. And it goes without saying that this manual is completely out of date in terms of however many things, because its scope and its level of detail is such that it would require something like a part-time job all through the year to try to keep up with changes in 15 or 20 different employee management workplace rules, some at a level of detail which I think might not even be out there. So it's like painting a bridge, when you get to the end of it, you got to start again at the beginning. I think it's really unwieldy. I can't believe another board did this. But in any event, I think all of these things, to the extent that they're important, are already in other places, and they should be sought out in those other places when the issue arises, so that you're dealing with the current whatever, the current union rule, the current leave without pay rule, the current disciplinary procedure. And that's just, so those are like Marty's points E and F. A couple of other thoughts. One is, it was so detailed and so restrictive that it seemed, in terms of employee management alone, which was 95% of it, I felt like it would really tie the hands of the board chair, who's ultimately responsible for supervising the district manager and guiding the district manager and managing the non-district manager employees. I also think that, given the level of detail, putting aside how difficult it would be to make sure that it was accurate, and who on the board could possibly, have the understanding of 30 or 40 different sources of laws, rules, and regulations to know that it would be sort of a trap for the leaders of the board, that they would somehow at some time run afoul of one of the provisions or not. And then that would become the issue, because there's this code, instead of just going to the source. And, finally, there were aspects of this, like a 1-year leave without pay obligation for staff, a 3 or 4 year childcare leave paid, that, I remember Dan, way back, I think it was Dan, educated me on, what would happen if a person left the board, and had a bunch of annual leave, and the board would not be able to hire another district manager for like a year or two or something crazy. And I think that, whatever this was in the manual almost certainly was incorrect, because it would simply destroy the board for a period
correct.
of time.
So
I would take this. It's not a bad thing to have on file in the office. Might be interesting to look at. It may be something that could be a guide for individual issues, but otherwise, I don't think it would be worth 60 seconds of anyone's time to work from this to create some, 30, 40, 50, 200 page manual where you're reinventing a wheel, and you don't even know if that wheel is up to date. So sorry for my getting on my soapbox, but I felt after reading the 80 pages, I would share
Nope.
the reaction.
Steve, I take your points wholeheartedly, and I agree with that. I think when I brought this up to Marty, I said, look at what another board had done, and this is very detailed. And I think I said at the last meeting that, this is something to kind of pick from, to use it as a guide and to pick from. And then it was basically stated at the last meeting that we had already started something. And it was much different than this. And again,
Mhm.
Marty, I keep saying, let's show everybody what it is, but I'll just email everybody what Lisa had sent us. So that way folks can see, where it is that the direction is taking, or at least what direction I believe it should go in.
Yeah, I think it was emailed to the members of the committee.
Oh, okay.
Was,
I mean, no, not
Yeah.
just now, but.
No,
but at
Lisa's.
some point-
Yeah, Lisa's.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have it in my briefcase, but.
Okay, good.
I in no way want to denigrate the work they had done. I thought it was excellent work. It was a great place to start. I just don't think it adds to this conversation at this time, but I will include it, even though you may have it in the minutes when I send it out.
But again, and again, I'm going to say it probably now for, the third time. The direction is going where Roz, Lisa, and Rosemary already started with that outline. And to pick anything that might be useful from this large guide that we could kind of throw in. That's my direction right now, Marty. And if
I-
a subcommittee is the way to do it, to
I would
continue
like to-
working on the guide that we have there, I'd love to do it.
Marty, if I may, closing words on this.
I hope they are the closing words. You
They are
have
the
better-
closing words on this because I worked with Lisa on this and we also discussed this amongst the officers. And for the section, for example, on office, those became desk guides, internal documents where the DM, where the staff talked about complaints, how we deal with complaints. These are not things that go up on the website. These are not things, these are internal things, much of it. And Lisa said as much in her email when she sent this, that certain things that are already public were meant to be public, and certain things here are not meant to be worked on by board members or LRE. That's what she said. I agree with Steve. A lot of the things that are in this 80 pages, can be gotten from the city charter. They're just laws, rules, without all the other blah, 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 or flaws that I saw in that. I found it to be very flawed, and I was surprised that you asked us to look at it if you had looked at it first. Anyway, there's a lot of things that are in the city charter. And that's where you would find a lot of this information. It's already out there. Didn't need to do this.
I don't think-
And like Steve said, I don't know why they did, but that worked for them.
I found these charts, which you have in front of you, to be interesting. I try to follow it. I didn't study it to the point of saying, did they leave anything out? The mistake, I don't know. I mean, there's stuff in here that's worth looking at. But as an opus, I think it's overdone, and it scares me that Board 3 felt the need to identify all of these malfeasances as if these are things that regularly occurred until they wrote this.
Well, Marty, it's one community board out of how many in New York City?
That's right.
59.
Well, so I mean, I'm not saying no one else has tried to do this or has done it, but I suspect that most boards, it would require some 50 years of their time to come up with something like this.
So where do we leave this? I do not hear another volunteer for the subcommittee. I do agree, and I will share the work that the board members had done in the past. And I leave it sit there until next month. If you feel anyone feels they want to raise it again. Hopefully those who've not read the document will buy some popcorn and at least have an opinion on it, other than it's voluminous.
Well,
And
Marty, sorry.
note I've made on my copy, now I don't see any of them, a number of comments along the way. Anyhow, I mean, some of the military leave is not something that's unique to a community board. Those are state and federal regulations and city regulations. So anyhow, I think this was overdone. I'm done on this. Any other comments? Camelia, I let somebody else speak. So if you have something to say,
Oh, thank you.
All I would
But,
say-
sorry.
Marty, all I would say about this is that leaving aside this document, because I think everybody's, said a bunch. If the table of contents that you circulated a couple months ago or a month ago, if people want to look at that before the next meeting, I'll be honest, I really devoted my time to the bigger document. But if people want to look at that and you want to put it on the agenda so that we can talk about whether we think any of those areas need the attention of LRE, then, maybe that's the way to go.
Well, I can send it back out again, either the full document or just the table of contents. You notice I have both up here now. I can do the, I will send the document out again.
No, Marty, I
Well,
think there's a
first, I need-
misunderstanding. I'm sorry, I may have confused things. I'm talking about the Lisa Daub.
I'm sending that out.
Okay, I'm not talking about this document. Don't send this document anywhere.
Okay,
Ever.
I intend to send Lisa's document out.
Okay, thank you.
Those who can't find it, and those who didn't see it. It's worth looking at, and it's worth to commend the people who wrote it and set it up. If there's no further comment, I'm very happy to drop this subject at this time. Item, let's see. What's right? Okay. Next issue also goes back to the ethical guidance manual. I think Dan and I don't know who else worked on it several years back. The concern that there was insufficient notice time when the nominating committee was identified, and for them to get out a notice quickly enough so that the public was aware of the next meetings. And so we came up with, and in the ethical guide, it says specifically as written here, the first meeting immediately follows adjournment. The day immediately following the April board meeting. What happened here? Okay, immediately following adjournment, the day immediately following, okay, so the first meeting is after adjournment of the board meeting, then immediately following the 6th and 7th days following, business days following, not calendar days. And so it'll never be on a Saturday, it'll never be on a Sunday, as some people have suggested. But apparently it was found that, and again, the objective, I believe, is written in here, is that upon meeting that first time after the board meeting, if those dates were inconvenient, there was no need to have those dates. So it just made I notice that these dates are canceled and the following dates are being used. I did a calendar. Let's try and get it back onto one page. Come on. Did a calendar. For this year. So there was the April board meeting. Which took place on the 18th, the day after. I should put down, that belongs here too, sorry. There's also a proposed meeting. Not requirement. These could be canceled immediately. And this is how the dates are set up for the actual rescheduling of those nominating committee meetings. The two important dates is one, if it was a normal, and we didn't know anything about New York City Philharmonic, normal, then the board meeting will be on the 13th, and the guidance manual says within 2 weeks prior to the board meeting, the slate has to be published. And so that 23rd would have been the normal date, but now since the board meeting is the 29th, then the critical date is May 15th, that the report is due.
June 14th,
June 14th, June 15th that the report is due.
right.
Sorry. So that's 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. Now, I frankly, even though there have been a number of people who said this needs to be changed, I frankly don't see the point. I just raise it because it was requested, and I tend to do that. But I see no reason, but I'm open for suggestions as why this may or may not need editing in any particular way.
Well, Marty, I'd like to speak first, since I was the one who drafted this back in 2020, I believe. I think it was part of our report of the nominating committee. And I think everything you say is correct. There was an effort to make sure that there were meetings scheduled soon enough without conflicts so that the committee could do its work. If, as you say, if June, what is it? If June 13th was the board meeting this year, and the report had to be in by the end of May, we would not succeed at that this year. We simply wouldn't meet the deadline, very likely. So that it is very important to have some early meetings scheduled so we sort of get the show on the road. And I think that that's been true, but it's been pointed out to me that there is an unwritten but very important rule of thumb that the board has followed for many years, which is to not schedule 2 board meetings at the same time. They can be on the same day if they're at different times, but they can't be on the same day at the same time. Without respect to whether I support that rule of thumb or not, if that is considered, assuming that that is considered an important limitation, then I do understand that there might need to be some flexibility. And I think that this could be rewritten, and I can address this in the nominating committee, or at least suggest to the nominating committee this year that we propose that there be some very modest modification of this, so that it's more a matter of not an exact date or 2 where a meeting has to be scheduled, but rather a certain number of meetings within a certain period of time. And then the board office would have to move whatever had to be moved around to make it happen that there were a certain number of nominating committee meetings, but it wouldn't tie the board office's hands and specifically say it has to be the 6th day or the 7th day. Obviously, the noticing the meeting for after the board meeting in April is not controversial because it's after the board meeting. But the other dates, I think that some flexibility could be built in as long as it ensures that the committee can meet, twice in the first week to 10 days. So that's my 2 cents. I can recommend to the nominating committee that they suggest language in their report. And there's no urgency to this because it won't come up again until next April. And then LRE can take a look at it in the fall.
Or perhaps if you have a wording, then go for the executive committee first. So they can look at this. Because your question is, can there be 2 meetings in the same night? And I'm not prepared I don't think we're prepared to answer that. I see there are 3 hands went up, but I don't know who they are.
Oh, my hand was up. Dan can go first because he's a committee member.
So it's up to you, Marty, whoever you want to call.
Dan, go ahead.
So Steve, we spent a lot of time going on this, and I know you kind of created this wording, and I remember when we went through this. And I remember the thought process behind this was there might be a meeting on one of those dates, and we went in full aware that there might be. And we said that we would just essentially schedule those meetings at different times, knowing many of the meetings in the beginning of the nominating committee are really dealing with logistics. And it's, that first meeting, you elect a chair, let's start getting out the notices. The next meeting is going to be like, all right, let's figure out, what do we want to do? Do we want to interview people, not interview people? What the heck? How do we want to run stuff? Knowing they're not going to be particularly long meetings, unless you get into it back and forth like we did, but mostly not going to be long meetings in that first 2 weeks. So if you schedule the nominating committee meeting for 6:30 or 6 p.m., depending on when your members could make it, and you made the next meeting on the same night at 7:30 p.m., you had an hour to meet. and it was sufficient to handle the logistics that you needed to handle and get to the next step of those open meetings. I don't see any problem with the language that we have. I think it just wasn't executed properly, and that was the problem that we had. I think, Steve, when you first met at your nominating committee, you explained the rules perfectly. I hung out, I listened to it. You explained the reason why we did this, how we did it, the dates you had available. You guys quickly picked that other date and you were up and running. There's no problem with the rules that we have.
Well, what
It
happened
was,
is- Yeah, sorry, just to.
I saw they planned 2 meetings, public safety on the same night, and all that needed
Right.
to happen was an adjustment of the times. That's
Right.
it. That's it. You just needed to adjust the times on the 2 meetings.
Yeah, you're right.
That's simple.
Good point.
I'll leave it there. But nothing
Laura?
needs to be changed, in my opinion, here.
Laura?
Sure. Actually, when you have 7 restaurants and bars coming to a meeting and you have a starting date, it's just not necessary to change public safety and to ask them to change their agenda. Because the agendas of the standing committees are often made weeks in advance. It's just not necessary. So what I appreciate what Steve said about certain flexibility. And I'll just go through this. What prompted this was a frustrated note from Ed saying, was there no other time for the nominating committee to meet? I might not have a quorum because one of the members of the nominating committee are on public safety, and he was quite upset. And the fact is, there were other dates and open dates. And this is what I would suggest. First, of course, no problem. Since 1974, since the bylaws, the nominating committee meets after the April full board meeting. It's a problem having a meeting the next night that's already been noticed, because the office the next day, that Wednesday, is concentrating on resolutions and concentrating, there's a lot of stuff. And then you may not be able to, they may not be able to cancel that meeting until the afternoon, or, to cancel a meeting that's taking place that night. What's the point? So I would never want to say, schedule a meeting the next night and depend on the office who, half the time somebody's out and it's difficult to cancel that meeting. So that's my first thought. The 6th business day, the way it worked out this year, was the Parks Committee. They couldn't change their time. And most people, we have a 7 o'clock time, and some meetings is still 7:30 because that suits the working schedule. So while it's true, if you're going to schedule meetings and assume they're at 6 o'clock, you're eliminating maybe half of your members from being able to do that. Wouldn't it be better to have a schedule and say, because we do have for years certain nights available, and they are known to the office. And if the language said, have these meetings scheduled in accordance with the calendar for 2023 or 2024 or 2025, where you look at this and you say in advance, no matter who the chair is, whatever. I know the nominating committee does not exist in advance, but our calendar exists. And we know that on certain days, we're free. It's only a couple of meetings, and then the others could possibly be 6 o'clock if you need more. But to have this arbitrary, pre-written 6th business day, which happens to have been the Parks Committee, and the 7th business day, which happened to be public safety this year, where simple coordination with the office is going to give you, excellent results in what we already know in advance. Because in my view, after all these years on the board, we had never scheduled 2 meetings at the same time. So that, in my view, the standing committees who have their agendas done in advance, there's no need to disrupt the standing committees because you need to have meetings of the nominating committee. It could all be worked out, but not when it's already prescribed like this. So I thank Steve. I mean, we've worked together this year, you know, on dates. And after 3 years of seeing the issues with the nominating committee, these are my comments. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to respond briefly, unless someone else who hasn't spoken yet wants to speak.
Okay, Steve.
I think that Dan has made a very good suggestion with regard to, you know, if the first 2 meetings can be scheduled at 6 o'clock. I say that with a little trepidation, because if we start meeting in person again, which everyone assumes we will, you know, that's a gargantuan imposition on me, and I guess I just probably just wouldn't be on the nominating committee in that event. But I do get it that that's a good safety valve if a meeting date is not open at 7. I also think it's perfectly appropriate to move another meeting to 7:30. The world won't come to an end. And then the nominating committee could have, you know, there could be extra room in there for people to go to both meetings. So I think Dan's point's very well taken. If Laura's point about the very next day becomes super problematic, because in most cases, meeting right after the board meeting is going to work. It's going to be the unusual case where you need the very next day. It could be changed so that it's 2 days hence. So then the board office staff doesn't have to send out a cancellation notice, you know, at 8:45 a.m. You know, they can do it at some point during the day and cancel it for the next day. You know, I always have said the board office logistics should never, ever determine what the board does. If people have to, like, you know, work harder on one day of the year, they can. But I don't even think that that's an issue, because if it's a good idea to make it the second day following the board meeting as a safety valve, and 9 times or 4 times out of 5 that's going to get canceled, I think that's a tweak that we can make. But again, I think the only way to do it in a way that makes it possible for the committee to get its work done is to set some sort of a time frame where there has to be a nominating committee meeting scheduled, you know, in the first week thereafter or something like that. And then people will simply have to find a slot for it. That, I think, gives sufficient flexibility. And so that's the kind of thing I would envision. Just, you know, I just want to say this year, Laura, you'll have to help me. When was our April meeting?
On the 18th, because April was so difficult because you had 4 days of Passover that meetings had to be canceled.
No, when was the board meeting?
April 18th.
Okay, so what I just wanted to say is that in order to get a meeting date, the next meeting date the committee was able to get this year, working with the board office and the calendars and all the rest of it, was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, May 2nd. And between April 18th and May 2nd is not acceptable. In the event that a June meeting is not held at the end of the month, but instead the normal second Tuesday, not having a second organizational meeting of the nominating committee until 14 or 15 days later is simply not supportable. So that's why it's really important to set aside a couple of dates or require that the meeting be held within the next, 8 days or something like that. And thereafter, it's always been the case that the nominating committee chair can work with the office to come up with dates, email back and forth with committee members and make sure they're available, and be okay for the third meeting. But that second meeting, or first and second meeting, absolutely has to happen within a very fixed period of time, even if that means other standing committees are simply canceled. That has to take precedence. There's no question in my mind about that. So I think it's possible to tweak this to give flexibility that's not there now. When you add to that the flexibility, as Dan said, of scheduling a meeting for 6 o'clock on one of these days, I think there's no possibility of a problem under those
Yeah,
circumstances.
I think 6 o'clock is fine. I don't think that ENS and TNT, I don't think they're going to cancel their meetings, Steve. Realistically, it's not necessary. I think we can all work together so that everybody will have a slot. and we'll get a slot. I
And it
hear-
didn't happen this year, Laura. That's my point. It absolutely didn't happen, notwithstanding me cooperating with you and the board office and trying to make it work. We couldn't get a second meeting until May 2nd. And I'm
Well, that's
telling you,
because we didn't make it early.
what?
We didn't, you didn't really want to do it at 6.
Well, we didn't really give that a
You know,
lot
but
of,
well, I
If
mean,
I
I
can
think
move
this
this
is a good
forward-
discussion. This is a great
I
discussion.
can
I
move this
appreciate it.
forward. It strikes me this year, there was no problem last year, to my knowledge, or the previous year. The issue this year is the Passover holidays, which screwed everybody's calendar up. So I tend to agree that the day after the board meeting may not be a good date. The purpose was, again, open meetings law, get those dates out as quickly as possible in advance, so public notice is there. Maybe we should drop that first meeting, on the first day after the board meeting. Beyond that, I would suggest at this point, we wait for the nominating committee's report to come out before we make any judgments.
yeah, I
By
just
the
want,
way,
one
Are
point. of
Friday, Saturday, and
information.
Sunday possible?
What's that?
Are
Is it-
Friday, Saturday,
No.
and Sunday possible?
No.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
So I just, the one thing, Laura, I would want to know, and obviously Marty and Dan, please chime in. I mean, if it was understood that the meeting had to be scheduled or whatever, within a certain period of time, do you think, Laura, as a practical matter, having been chair for 3 years and Dan having been chair for 3 years before that, and Marty having been chair many years ago, do you think it's feasible for the board office to know every year without being told by a nominating committee chair who hasn't been elected yet, that in advance of the April calendar, there has to be, work done in March to actually fix those meetings in the calendar before there's a nominating committee?
It
You
could
see
be.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, it could
That
be.
becomes a
but-
job.
But
That
we're missing something. You're saying that a standing committee should cancel a meeting when you're not even sure, because the committee has not been formed, whether that committee can make that particular date. So you can't just be one hand clapping because
No,
you
no, no,
have
no,
to
Laura,
work with
you're-
your committee.
No, Laura, you're missing the point completely. These dates were set without regard to the committee's ability to meet, just to give them the flexibility of.
And they were canceled every year.
I'm sorry?
And for the most part, they're canceled.
It's intended that 2 of the 3 meetings will be canceled.
But
That's
so
the
that doesn't
whole
solve your
intention.
problem. In other words, it doesn't solve your problem that you need to meet. I'm sure we could figure this out.
No, but
I'm
the
sure
thing
we
is,
could
but
figure this out.
Laura, what's important, and I think it is, and we can take the conversation offline, is the board office and the board chair, or whoever else is setting the schedule in March for April, right? They have to see it. If it's a poster on the wall or whatever, they have to see it as part of their job description to actually figure it out before April, to actually pick meetings that fit the time
But we
period.
certainly could say no special committees would be meeting.
No, that's not,
In other words, those are the practical ways we could look at scheduling and look at the committees that the office serves and look at the calendar and
I'm gonna-
anticipate.
Steve, I'm going to ask you again. We will look at the nominating committee report. Your
Okay.
suggestion, I think, is a valid one and ought to be considered.
okay.
And I will put that in the minutes and await the nominating committee report before any action is taken. I do not believe dates, I question whether or not these dates were canceled because they were too close or in conflict, or they just weren't needed. But the
But-
intent was the fact that the organizational meeting took place, and I will tell you, maybe I shouldn't, but as chair of nominating committee one year, we were meeting on, I believe, I can't remember the site at the moment, but the meeting went on forever. And so when the meeting adjourned, there was no, the board meeting was adjourned. There was no time. We were being thrown out of the facility.
So
So I had after announcing it, we met at off-site somewhere. So we reconvened that night, but not at the location that was previously announced.
Which violates the
So-
meeting notice.
Correct. So Marty, you reminded me when we did this, the meeting you're talking about was the Riverdale Y. They were closing us up at 10 o'clock PM. And the issue we had, and the reason why we did the very next night was because if a meeting went too late and we couldn't stay at a location, or if a member had to leave because of transportation reasons, we had the very next day available. And that's why we did it. And to be quite honest, look, I was chair for 3 years. I had 2 staff members through most of that time period. To send a 5-minute email out to cancel a meeting really isn't that much to do the very next day. And Steve, your point is absolutely valid. We have this in here. So planning should happen in the month of March as you're looking at the holidays and where they fall, and keeping these dates as the primary dates. And if you're going to put another meeting on that same night, then look at it from the perspective of, okay, nominating committee is primary. And if we're
Right.
putting something else on here, we're going to put that at 7:30 PM or 7:45 or something along those lines. Public safety, I don't think even had a quorum on the night.
No,
that
they didn't have a quorum.
They
It
didn't,
was a
yeah.
waste of time. Right.
Correct.
Well, it wasn't a waste
So-
of time. They're bringing up their nominations from the floor, but actually.
But that is,
Dan,
they're not allowed to
it's-
conduct business.
No.
So again, to the extent they had a meeting and conducted business, they probably should not have.
All right, I'm ready to move the agenda.
I want to say one last thing.
No, I'm stopping here because everybody else has one
Please.
last thing. I'm moving the agenda. And by the way, Dan, that was not the meeting I was referring to. I have no idea what the Y did. The one I was in was a whole different place. So I'm going to
I
skip.
remember nominating committee trying to meet at the Y one of the years
Marty,
afterwards, and we had to. leave.
Marty, I just want to explain something in 1 second. It's putting
Time's
it up,
up.
changing the calendar, it's changing the website, it's changing Facebook. It is not a 5-minute thing.
Time is up. You've already
Done.
had your time. The
Thank you.
second is up. Thank you. I'm not going to go through all of this. In fact, I'm going to try and rush to conclude. Just there were 4 items that came under the COIB. It'd be easier for me to send it to you rather than go through it all now. But it amazes me with all we talked about and the need for worried about conflict of interest. Just happy to know that at this item right here, it's an attorney working for the city who violated a conflict of interest. So if John Doe doesn't know what the rules are, one would hope that the attorneys working for the city know, but apparently not. Legislative calendar I sent out. The only thing I did differently is I segregated those items that were used for items that were already enacted. So when committees look at the legislative calendar, they should at least know that the following laws are in place.
Hey, Marty, though, the conflict of interest stuff just above there, did you send that to us?
I will.
Okay, good. I'd like to read that. Thank you.
I didn't, but I will.
Thank you.
Since we're not discussing it now. Legislative calendar, I just addressed. You all received copies of that. Old business, new business, anything? Anybody?
Yeah, Marty, just one item, not for tonight, but next month I would like to discuss, it was raised at the parliamentarian session that we went to, the city charter, how it supersedes many of how it does supersede our bylaws, how it does supersede Robert's Rules of Order. And I do want to get to section 2801 of the city charter, dealing with like acts and decisions of the board and how they relate to matters and how issues are handled from our board. Specifically, what is a decision of this board? What is the authority of this board to make an action or make a decision?
What was that section again?
2801.
Okay, I will look at that. Should
Great,
show-
thanks.
And with that statement, you've answered my question. It looks like, Laura, we are going to use the June 12th meeting. I need the date.
Okay.
And we're having a meeting. If there is no other comments, then I would be happily accept the motion to adjourn.
Sir, I'm sorry, I have a hand up.
I don't see the
Cavalier?
hands. Go
Can I
ahead.
proceed? Thank you, thank you. So I just wanted to explain one more time in much more simple ways what I tried to say, comparing your minutes with the ethical guidance manual.
I
In your
thought you were
minute,
very clear. Very clear, and I will look at the ethical guidance manual and come back with a full discussion of it for next month.
okay, great. Just to say again, this is an open item as we speak. As we speak, resolutions were sent to full board and to the community with a reference to an agency where a board member is a board member. Yeah, even though in exec, the discussion was that that agency would be removed, particularly because of conflict of interest. The words of LRE are important. And when you put there that LRE has no weight, LRE has weight. And this is the role of LRE, according to the ethical guidance manual, to be available, not to say, don't come to me, to be available for advice. Just wanted to say that. Thank you.
And since you raised it, I will add for the record, from my perspective, I think Bob, what's Bob's last name? Come on.
Bender,
Right.
Filuzzi?
Bob Bender, thank you. I think Bob Bender did an excellent job in running that meeting, but I think we were all lost by not having the expertise of Chuck, who knows more than we'll ever know about this. And as far as I know, his integrity is beyond reproach. So I think we lost out on that foray. But I
Um,
shall look into that. And that, I
Marty?
will take a motion to adjourn.
Marty, my
Motion
hand's
to
up.
adjourn. Oh,
Motion's been made. Any second?
you,
Second.
you have a,
wanted to say something, but that's okay.
A motion to adjourn takes precedence, but I will give you the courtesy.
Camelia,
Violation of Robert's rules.
Marty and I attended several meetings with the head of this division, the Conflict of Interest Division. And he was absolutely explicit that when you have a problem or a question, you don't go to LRE, you go to the Conflict of Interest Board. And so I want to say that that is where it is. Even as a committee, there are certain boundaries, and Marty gave the right answer. That's all I want to
Yeah,
say.
Laura, so then modify the ethical guidance to say the committee
I
is
think the
not
ethical guidance
available.
might be tweaked because it's
Yeah,
older
so
than
that's
the
what I'm
conversation
saying.
we had. Yeah.
Yeah, the committee
And
is
I will
not
look at it and
available.
report back.
Right.
Motion
And
made to
also-
adjourn. And was
Second.
seconded. Any objections? Good night, all. Enjoy the evening.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
The
Thank you,
weather has been
everybody.
perfect.
Yes,
Enjoy.
thank you, everyone.
good night.
Be well.
Good night.